The universe, for the people of the Vanguard, was metal, darkness, and dust. Their world was a hollowed-out cylinder, a third of a mile wide and 10 miles long, a colossal metal seed adrift in a silent, starless void they called the Great Black. For 15 generations they had lived and died within its aging, groaning skin, their history a patchwork of faded legends and superstitions, their sky a ceiling of rust and tangled conduits. They were the children of the Ark, and they had forgotten the meaning of the word. Life within the Vanguard was fractured. Society had splintered into 3 warring tribes. In the humid, overgrown ruin of the central hydroponics bays, the Greendales prayed to the Hydro Mother, their name for the wheezing atmospheric processors that gave them air and water. In the hot, rumbling engineering decks at the ship's stern, the Forge clans made ritual sacrifices of scrap metal to their silent, dormant engine god. And in the dark, cramped, and forgotten maintenance tunnels that formed the ship's spine lived the Tunnelfolk. They were scavengers, recyclers, ghosts in the machine. Asha was one of them. She was a wire runner, prized for being nimble, small, and fearless. While others scavenged for simple scrap, she hunted for the ghost wires, the ancient, data-rich cables that sometimes still pulsed with the faintest trickle of energy from the before time. Her grandmother, a story keeper, had told her tales of those times, fragmented myths of a world lit by a sun, of a real, open sky filled with stars. The other Tunnelfolk dismissed these as dangerous fantasies, but for Asha, they were a private obsession, a reason to climb higher and delve deeper into the ship's forgotten corners. She was on a run now, high in the uninhabited superstructure, far above the Tunnelfolk's warrens. She was hunting for a legendary prize, a junction box of fiber-optic cable, which, according to the old legends, could carry light itself. Her search had taken her too close to the borders of the Forge clan's territory. A patrol had spotted her, 3 hulking warriors, their faces smeared with grease, their voices loud and aggressive. She ran, her small frame a blur in the darkness, their heavy, stomping boots echoing behind her. She knew these upper levels better than they did. She scrambled up a maintenance ladder into a tight ventilation shaft, a route that was not on any of their scavenged maps, and held her breath, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, until the sounds of the patrol faded into the ship's constant, low hum. She had escaped, but she was now in a part of the ship she had never seen. The shaft opened into a corridor unlike any other. It was not dark and grimy, but pristine. The walls were a smooth, pearlescent white, and the air was still, cold, and strangely clean, without the familiar taste of rust and recycled humanity. At the end of the hall was a massive, circular blast door, emblazoned with a faded, unfamiliar symbol, a stylized star, cradled by a pair of elegant, open hands. Driven by a curiosity that had been fostered by her grandmother's stories, she approached the door. A recessed panel sat beside it. With a grunt of effort, she pulled it open, revealing a simple, manual release lever, frozen with age. She threw all her weight against it. Asha stepped through, into a vast, dark, and silent chamber. The air was cold and smelled of ozone and dust. The room was circular, and one entire wall was a sheet of dark, dead glass that looked out into the absolute blackness of the void. In the center of the room sat a single, high-backed command chair, surrounded by dormant, silent consoles. It was a tomb of forgotten technology. It was the command bridge, a place from the oldest and most sacred legends. She approached the central chair with a reverence she didn't know she possessed. She ran her hand over a smooth, cool console. As her fingers, smudged with grime, brushed the surface, it flickered to life. A single, blue, holographic light coalesced in the air before her. It formed the calm, androgynous face of a being made of pure information, its features serene and ancient. Life sign detected. Command level access denied. Identity not recognized. Please state your designation and purpose. I am the Warden, this vessel's custodian AI. Tunnelfolk is not a recognized crew or passenger designation. My records show no authorized personnel have been on this bridge for 412 years, since the emergency hibernation protocols were enacted during the Great Dimming event. The Warden spoke of the Great Dimming not as a myth, but as a historical event. Asha, emboldened by a sudden, desperate need to understand the stories her grandmother had told her, found her voice. Asha, the legends, they say the Great Dimming burned the world outside. That the Great Black is poison, and the ship is all there is. That is an unfortunate corruption of the historical record. The Great Black is not empty. Your ancestors simply forgot how to turn on the lights. With a gesture of its holographic hand, the dead glass wall of the viewport shimmered. The external dust shields retracted, and the viewscreen's polarization filters disengaged. For the first time in her life, and the first time for anyone on the Vanguard in over 4 centuries, Asha saw the stars. 1,000,000,000,000 points of brilliant, cold, beautiful fire, scattered across a velvet blackness so deep it hurt to look at. It was not a void. It was an ocean, a universe of infinite light and possibility, and the Vanguard was a tiny, lonely ship sailing upon it. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face at the sheer, overwhelming, impossible beauty of it. The Warden showed her everything. It showed her holographic recordings of a vibrant, blue-green world called Earth, a world of impossible open spaces and a sky that was not a ceiling. It showed her the glorious launch of the Vanguard, a promise made to the future. And then, it showed her their destination, a single, beautiful, cloud-swirled planet orbiting a distant yellow sun. Our destination. Kepler, 186f. A new Earth. The journey was meant to take 600 years. The Great Dimming, a coronal mass ejection from a rogue star we passed, crippled the ship's primary systems and wiped the central memory banks. The original command crew perished sealing a reactor breach. The ship, to survive, entered a low-power hibernation state. Over the generations, without the historical data, the mission was forgotten. But the ship remembers. The AI's projection changed to a star map, showing their current position on a long, graceful trajectory. A single point on that trajectory ahead of them was flashing red. And now, a critical moment has arrived. We are approaching a gravitational slingshot point around a neutron star. It is a navigational window that occurs only once in a century. We must restart the main engines and perform a final, crucial course correction within the next 3 rotations of this ship. If we fail, our trajectory will carry us into the empty space between galaxies. The mission will be lost forever. It turned its calm, blue gaze to Asha. To restart the engines, the ship's systems must be unified and powered by the main reactor. The tribes, as you call them, must work as one. I can provide the knowledge, Asha of the Tunnelfolk. But I cannot leave this bridge. You must be my voice. You must make them remember what they have forgotten. Asha, a girl who had only known darkness and rust, was now burdened with the light of the entire universe. She stood up, her face still wet with tears, but her expression no longer one of fear, but of a new, terrifying, and profound resolve. The Warden gave her a single, working datapad, its screen showing the impossible, beautiful image of their destination, and a wealth of lost knowledge. She took it, its weight feeling like the weight of her entire world, and walked out of the command bridge, leaving the silent stars behind to return to the darkness of her home, her seemingly impossible task laid out before her. Asha returned to her home in the Warren of Tunnels, her mind a universe of newfound light, her heart heavy with the burden of her mission. The familiar darkness of her home, once a comfort, now felt like a cage. She called a meeting of the Tunnelfolk elders, her voice, once quiet and deferential, now ringing with a strange new authority. She stood before them in the central cavern, the datapad from the command bridge held in her hands like a sacred torch. She told them everything. She spoke of the silent, pristine bridge, of the Warden AI, and of the sea of stars that had been stolen from their sight. She showed them the image on the datapad, the beautiful, cloud-swirled world of Kepler, 186f, their promised home. For 15 generations, we have been living in the dark. We believe the legends that the ship is all there is. But the legends are wrong. We are not just survivors, we are travelers. And our journey is almost over. But we have to restart the engines. We have to work together. Her words were met with a wall of fear and skepticism. The elders, led by a grim, old scavenger named Kalen, saw her story not as a promise, but as a blasphemy. Lies. These are the dangerous fantasies of the before time. The great dimming taught us the truth, the only safety is in the darkness, in the routine, in the scrap we pull from the guts of this ship. To dream of stars is to invite chaos. She is a heretic, spouting nonsense from a magic box. He pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at the datapad. Asha's own people turned away from her, shaking their heads, their fear of the unknown far greater than any promise of a new world. But not all of them. A few of the younger wire runners, their faces etched with the same hunger for more that had always driven Asha, looked at the glowing image on the screen, and a dangerous spark of hope was lit in their eyes. Asha knew then that she could not convince her people with words alone. She had to show them. And she couldn't start here, in this burrow of fear. Her journey took her to the Viridian, the name the Greendales had given to the massive, 5-mile-long hydroponics bays. It was a world of suffocating humidity, thick with the scent of decay and struggling life, all lit by the weak, flickering glow of a dying artificial sun. The Greendales were a pale, gaunt people, their worship of the Hydro Mother, the Central Water and Air Reclamation Unit, growing more desperate as their crops failed and the water became brackish. Asha did not arrive preaching about stars. She came as a technician, the datapad in her hand displaying not a distant world, but a schematic of the machine they worshipped. She found their matriarch, a stern, weary woman named Lyra, leading a prayer for clean water before the wheezing, groaning machine. Lyra and her people looked at the strange girl from the dark tunnels with suspicion. But Asha, using the Warden's knowledge, pointed to schematics on her datapad, explaining the concepts of pressure loss, of mineral calcification in the primary filters, of atmospheric imbalance. They were words the Greendales had not heard in centuries, but they were words of logic and truth. Hesitantly, Lyra granted her permission. For 2 full shifts, Asha guided a team of skeptical young farmers, showing them how to bypass a clogged, century-old irrigation valve and how to recalibrate the nutrient mixers. She spoke their language, not of gods, but of harvest. With a great shudder, the Hydro Mother came back to life. Clean, fresh water poured into the irrigation channels. Miles away, a secondary atmospheric processor, now receiving full power, hummed to life, and the artificial sun in the ceiling brightened, its light turning from a sickly yellow to a warm, healthy gold. The Greendales fell to their knees, weeping with joy. Asha had given them a miracle. Lyra looked at Asha, her eyes filled with a new reverence. Asha had found her first allies. But news of the miracle worker from the tunnels traveled fast. In the hot, fiery engineering decks at the ship's stern, the warlord of the Forge clans, Kale, listened to his scouts' reports with a tightening jaw. He was a charismatic, brutal leader who had built his power on strength, on raiding the other tribes for resources, and on the fanatical worship of the dormant engine god. A Sunbringer. He spat into the forge. She is a snake, whispering lies to the weak. If the Greendales grow strong, they will no longer need to trade their food for our protection. If the Tunnelfolk believe in fantasies, they will no longer scavenge the parts we need. This girl is not a prophet, she is a poison that will upset the balance of our world. He saw her not as a savior, but as a threat to his entire way of life. A united people had no need for a warlord. He stood before his warriors, their faces illuminated by the fires of the forge. This Sunbringer is a heretic. She blasphemes against the sanctity of the engine god. She preaches a false sky to blind you to the truth of steel and fire. We will march on the Viridian. We will extinguish her light. We will take their water, their food, and we will bring this heretic before the engine god to be judged. His warriors roared their approval, raising their hammers and scrap metal axes, their war chants echoing through the fiery halls of the heart. Back in the Viridian, a new alliance was being forged. The Greendales had pledged their loyalty to Asha and her cause. They now worked with a new vigor, tending to their revitalized crops, their faces filled with a hope they had never known. Asha, using the Warden's vast agricultural knowledge, was teaching them how to build a sustainable ecosystem, the first step towards preparing the Vanguard for its long slumbering population. They were in the middle of a planning session with Lyra and her council when a young Greendale scout, breathless and pale, burst into the chamber. Matriarch. An army. The Forge clans are on the march. Hundreds of them. They are heading for the main entrance to the Viridian. A wave of panic washed over the Greendales. They were farmers and botanists, not warriors. The Tunnelfolk were scavengers, not soldiers. They were no match for the armed, disciplined might of the Forge clans. Asha stood, her face grim. She looked at the faces of her new allies, at the hope she had just managed to cultivate. She knew her mission to unite humanity had just triggered its first war. The clock was ticking, not just towards their missed navigational window, but towards the arrival of an army at her door. The army of the Forge clan stood before the main gates of the Viridian, a sea of warriors armed with scrap metal axes and plasma cutters, their faces grim in the half-light of the ship's corridors. Inside, the Greendales, armed with little more than farming tools and terror, looked to their matriarch. Lyra looked to Asha. The weight of 1,000 lives now rested on the shoulders of the young wire runner from the tunnels. They will break down the gates in an hour. We have no weapons, child. No way to fight them. Guided by the Warden's vast knowledge, Asha became a guerrilla engineer. She directed the Greendales not to build barricades, but to open irrigation valves, flooding the main entrance corridor with a slick, impassable layer of nutrient-rich algae. She had them reroute the atmospheric controls, filling the secondary corridors with a thick, disorienting fog of non-toxic vapor. Then, she accessed the powerful, full-spectrum lamps that served as the Viridian sun. When Kale's warriors finally breached the main gate, they were not met with a defending force, but with chaos. As they slipped and slid through the flooded entrance, Asha activated the lamps, unleashing a series of brilliant, disorienting strobes of pure white light, blinding the invaders. From the Viridian's PA system, her voice, amplified and clear, echoed through the chamber. Asha, warriors of the Forge. You are not our enemies. We are all children of the Vanguard. The truth is not in the fire of your forges, but in the darkness between the stars. Her words, combined with the disorienting defenses, sowed confusion among the ranks. But Kale was a force of nature. Roaring in fury, he pushed through his own confused warriors, his eyes fixed on Asha, who stood with Lyra on a high gantry overlooking the entrance. He would not be denied his victory. He began to climb up the gantry, his massive axe in his hand. He reached the gantry, cornering Asha and Lyra. He raised his axe, ready to strike down the heretic who threatened his entire world. You worship the strength of the before-time, Kale. But you have forgotten its heart. Warden, show them. As a final, desperate act, Asha had the Warden hack into the Viridian's main view screens, which were still visible through the chaos. But she did not show them the stars. Not yet. Instead, she projected images from the Warden's deep core archives, the last uncorrupted historical files. On the screens, the Forge clans saw it. Images of their ancestors, not as warriors, but as brilliant engineers, working side by side with the ancestors of the Greendales and the Tunnelfolk. They saw them building the great engine, not as an idol, but as a tool. They saw them laughing together, sharing meals, their faces filled with a shared purpose, a unified hope. They saw proof that the tribes were a lie, a product of desperation, not destiny. The warriors below fell silent, their weapons lowering as they stared at the images of their shared past. Kale himself hesitated, his axe lowered, his face a mask of confusion. Asha, you see, Kale. Our strength was never in our tribes. It was in our unity. That is the truth of the before time. She took a deep breath. And now, for the truth of our future. She entered the final command. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Then, the ceiling came to life. It was no longer a ceiling, but a perfect, high-resolution projection from the command bridge's main view screen. For the first time in centuries, the people of the Vanguard, farmer, warrior, and scavenger alike, saw the stars. A universe of brilliant, silent fire. A majestic, swirling nebula of impossible color. And in the center of it all, a single, beautiful, blue and white planet, their long-forgotten destination, growing ever so slightly larger in the view screen. The image was so vast, so beautiful, so overwhelmingly real, that a profound, reverent silence fell over the entire chamber. Kale stood frozen, the heavy axe slipping from his numb fingers and clattering to the floor. His engine god was just a machine. His world was just a ship. And his sky, the great black, was not a void, but a promise. He fell to his knees, not in defeat, but in awe. The future of the Vanguard was born in that moment of shared wonder. There was no great battle. Kale's authority was not broken by a weapon, but by a moment of pure, undeniable truth. A new council was formed, with Asha representing the Tunnelfolk, a wise Lyra representing the Greendales, and a quiet, humbled, but still strong Kale representing the Forge clans. Their first, unified act was to begin the great work of restarting their world. The final scene takes place 2 rotations later. Asha stands on the command bridge, the star map glowing before her. Beside her stand Lyra and Kale, looking not at each other, but out at the stars. The Warden's holographic form floats nearby, observing. The main reactor is now stable. The engines are online. We have reached the navigational window. Awaiting your command for the final course correction, Counselor Asha. Asha looked at her fellow leaders. Kale nodded, his face filled with a new, focused purpose. Lyra smiled, a look of serene hope. Together, they had brought their world back from the brink. With a deep, powerful rumble that vibrated through the entire 10-mile length of the ship, the great engines of the Vanguard fired, not with a roar of war, but with a song of purpose. On the main view screen, their trajectory, a long, straight line to oblivion, began to bend, curving gracefully towards a distant neutron star that would be their final slingshot. They had made it. Their future was secure. The long journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but for the first time in centuries, the people of the Ark of Lost Stars were not just surviving in a decaying prison, they were traveling in a vessel of hope. They were looking up, together, at their new home, waiting for them across the sea of stars. 3 months had passed since the Great Awakening. 3 months since the people of the Vanguard had looked up and seen the stars. A fragile unity had been forged in the fire of that revelation. The grand, silent command bridge, once a forgotten myth, was now the heart of a new, unified government. The council, led by Asha, the wise matriarch Lyra, and a humbled, grimly determined Kale, worked day and night, grappling with the immense task of transforming their warring tribes into a unified crew. They were no longer just surviving, they were preparing. The Warden AI had laid out their path, a series of complex navigational maneuvers, culminating in a critical gravitational slingshot around a neutron star in less than a month. It was this maneuver that would give them the velocity needed to complete their centuries-long journey to Kepler 186f. For the first time, the future felt real, tangible, a destination on a map. But the ghosts of the past were not so easily silenced. Critical alert. A catastrophic failure has been detected in the primary navigational core. All guidance. On the main view screen, the clear, confident line of their flight path dissolved into a flashing, angry red box that read, "Trajectory uncertain." Asha rushed to the console, her heart pounding. "Warden, what happened? Is it a system decay?" The Warden, "Negative. This was not a malfunction. My internal diagnostics show that multiple crystalline guidance processors within the nav core were deliberately and simultaneously shattered. This was an act of sabotage. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Kale stared at the screen, his face a mask of stone, but his eyes burned with a cold, familiar fury. He knew, without a doubt, who was responsible. The methods were crude, but effective. It was the work of the Forge. There is a faction within my clan. Zealots. They still whisper prayers to the engine god. They see our unity, our belief in your sky fantasies, as a betrayal of our strength. He turned to Asha, his face etched with a shame and responsibility that was terrible to behold. They see me as a fallen prophet. This is my failure. I will handle it. Asha, and the nav core. Can it be repaired? The Warden, the core's technology is vastly complex. It requires a human touch, an intuitive understanding of crystalline resonance that my robotic drones do not possess. The knowledge of how to perform such a repair was lost during the Great Dimming. The archives contain the schematics, but it would be like showing a blueprint for a fusion reactor to a man who has only ever known how to light a fire. We have less than a month before the slingshot maneuver. If we are flying blind when we hit that neutron star's gravity well. She didn't need to finish the sentence. They would be torn apart. The mission divided. Asha, her face set with resolve, would lead a team to attempt the impossible repair. Kale, his honor as a leader on the line, would hunt the saboteurs in the ship's fiery heart. The fragile new alliance was facing its first, and perhaps final, test. Kale moved through the domain he once ruled, but he was now a stranger. The familiar clang of hammers on anvils was still there, but the sounds were now resentful. The eyes that followed him were filled with suspicion. He confronted his former lieutenant, a massive, bull-necked warrior named Warwick, whose faith in the engine god was as solid as the scrap metal hammer he carried. Kale, the nav core is destroyed, Warwick. Was it you? It was the will of the engine. You have us chasing ghost lights in the sky, listening to the whispers of a machine and a girl from the tunnels. You have abandoned our strength. Our traditions. I have not. I have simply reminded the people that our survival comes from the heat of the forge and the iron in our blood, not from fragile maps of make-believe worlds. Kale, you have doomed us all. Without that sky fantasy, this ship is a coffin. Rorik, no. It is a crucible. It forges the strong and melts the weak. When your new age fails, when the people are once again cold and afraid, they will remember where the true power lies. They will return to the engine. They will return to me. Kale knew he could not reason with him. This would have to be settled in the old way. A battle not just for control, but for the very soul of his people. Meanwhile, Asha and a small team of the brightest young engineers from all three tribes floated in the zero-gravity heart of the navigational core. It was a sphere of humming, interlocking crystalline lattices, a place of breathtaking complexity. Guided by the Warden's instructions, they worked frantically, trying to decipher the ancient science, their clumsy hands attempting the delicate surgery required to replace the shattered processors. They were making progress, but it was slow, agonizing work. They had replaced most of the damaged crystals, but one key component was irreparable, the primary resonance harmonizer, a unique focusing crystal that aligned the entire system. Their last spare had been shattered by the saboteurs. Warden, there has to be another one. Search the entire ship's original manifest. Any component made of the same material. There is one object on the manifest that contains a harmonizer crystal of the correct size and purity. It was designated as a ceremonial component for the ship's original command structure. The AI displayed an image. It is the object that your people have fashioned into what you call the Hammer of Kale. Asha stared at the image. The crystal was embedded in the head of the massive, ornate hammer that Kale, and the Forge clan warlords before him, had carried for generations as a symbol of their divine right to rule. It was the ultimate relic of the engine god faith. And it was the only thing that could save them. She opened a channel to Kale, just as he was facing down Rorik and a dozen of his zealot warriors in the main chamber of the engine room. Kale. I need your hammer. The crystal inside it, it's the key. It's our only chance to fix the nav core. Rorik and his followers heard her message over the chamber's speakers. A great, triumphant laugh erupted from the zealot's throat. You hear that, my brothers? The heretic demands our sacred relic. She asks our leader to shatter the symbol of our strength to chase her foolish dream. This is the ultimate test. Will you follow a leader who would break our spirit, or will you follow the will of the engine? All eyes turned to Kale. He stood between two worlds. In his hand, he held the past, the power, the tradition, the faith of his ancestors. On the comm, he heard the future, the desperate, logical plea for a sacrifice that would save everyone. He looked at the hammer, at the ancient, revered object. Then he looked at the faces of his people, the zealots and the loyalists. He saw the conflict, the fear, the doubt. And he knew what he had to do. He was no longer just a warlord of the Forge. He was a leader of the Vanguard. Rorik is right. This is a test. He raised the hammer high. He says this hammer is our strength. He is wrong. Our strength is not in a single piece of metal. It is in our will to survive. To build. To move forward. He roared, a sound of pure, final conviction. The engine god is dead. The ship is life. And our life is in the stars. With a mighty heave, he brought the sacred hammer down upon the edge of a massive, solid steel anvil. The hammer's head splintered, and from its core, a perfect, blue, softly glowing crystal fell to the floor. Kale picked it up. He had not just broken a relic, he had broken the spell of the past. Rorik and his zealots stared, their fanatical certainty shattered, their god proven false by the hand of their own leader. Kale gave the crystal to a loyal warrior. Get this to the nav core. Now. The crystal arrived just in time. With trembling hands, Asha slotted it into place. The nav core, silent for days, whined to life, its crystalline lattices glowing with a steady, healthy blue light. Navigational systems are online. Trajectory confirmed. We are approaching the neutron star. The slingshot maneuver will proceed as planned. On the command bridge, Lyra and the council watched as the Vanguard, now flying true, gracefully rounded the immense gravitational pull of the neutron star, its speed increasing, its path to Kepler 186f finally, irrevocably secure. The sabotage, designed to tear their new society apart, had instead forged it into something stronger. Kale returned to the council not as a diminished leader, but as one who had proven his ultimate loyalty to the mission. The people of the Vanguard had faced the ghosts of their own past and had chosen, together, to fly towards the dawn.